We are very proud of our relationship with the UN Global Compact as an original signatory, and in addition to contributing to the development of the Women's Empowerment Principles, we're one of the first 39 organizations to sign the CEO Statement of Support. Today, there are more than 500 CEOs that have signed the CEO Statement of Support, including many of our member firms, including Croatia, New Zealand, Iceland, to name just a few. Inclusion, strategy for change, the theme for today resonates for all of us. At Deloitte, diversity is a strategic business imperative and one of our 6 global talent priorities. Leveraging diversity is not only one of our key values and strengths, it's critical to how we lead our business. Inclusion leads to greater innovation, better client relationships, and our experience and research show that effective programs lead to businesses performing better, and that inclusion is the key to that success. We have a superb agenda for today and could hardly fit more into a one-day event. So thank you very much for coming, and I'm going to hand the floor over to Georg Kell, who hardly needs an introduction. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Deloitte and the other sponsors for making this event possible here in this wonderful, wonderful venue. Good morning, everybody. I hope you have a good day. We know many of you have come from very far. We are aware of the investment you're making into growing the women's empowerment principles further. I just want to tell you very briefly how excited we are, because the UN Global Compact works as a voluntary initiative establishing the business case for doing the right thing and being transparent about what we are doing. And globally, we have now 7,000 active corporate participants organized in more than 100 country networks. Here in New York, we do actually very little these days, except for trying to manage growth and to support growth. We are like building the infrastructure for enabling others to fill it with the right intention and the right actions. Women's empowerment principles stands out. We have 8 global issue platforms from climate, business and peace, supply chain, sustainable agriculture, water, and so forth. 8 of them, but only one of them is actually the number 1 now, and that's Women's Empowerment Principles, because it has overtaken our second biggest platform, Caring for Climate. And as we see it, it is the first platform that has the potential to reach critical mass. We all know to be transformative, we not only need to win over a few champions, but we need to make sure this triggers off a change movement, a movement that grows by itself, not because some bureaucrats in New York are preaching something, which is very important now and then and helpful, hopefully, but primarily. Oh, sorry, Michelle, I was about to introduce you just in a moment. There are notable exceptions, always. But the really exciting thing about the Women's Empowerment Principles is that they grow bottom up. Many of our country networks have taken them on. They understand the business case, and those committed are willing to invest at the country level within the right context, and they make the case for it. And this is the truly exciting thing. So ahead of us, we have a rich day. We hope this day will help each other to motivate us again, but primarily I would hope that it will give us a strategic guidance of how we grow the women's empowerment principles into a transformative movement. To get there, we need critical mass. 500 from 40 countries is great, but it's not yet enough to change situations in many places around the world. Critical mass doesn't need to mean majority. That would be a very tall order. There are more than 80,000 multinational corporations. But critical mass means sufficient numbers and sufficient momentum to make sure that those who are sitting on the fence and not yet willing to step down will be silenced, because the movement is becoming so strong. So with these few words, I just want to welcome you all and tell you how excited we all are. And it is my great privilege now to hand over to Madame Michelle Bachelet, who truly doesn't need an introduction. Please.
Good morning, Excellencies, honored guests, colleagues and friends, ladies ladies, there's a lot of ladies, and some gentlemen that are here. I always hope that next time, George, that we'll have more men on board. But we're so happy to be here, and I would like to thank Deloitte and, of course, Georg Kell, Executive Director of UN Global Compact Office, for hosting us today. But I also want to thank Deloitte because of when they started to try to improve the presence of women in their own company, and they struggle for it. And then they wrote this Harvard Business Review where they clearly show how it was not only about the glass ceiling, but also about the invisible bias and about the leaking pipelines, that I think it make a lot of people understood that there was much more that needed to change in order to really achieve the parity and the diversity and the inclusion of women in the economy that not only women deserve, but the economy needs dramatically, I would say. Well, I'm delighted to join you this morning as we kick off the 5th annual Women's Empowerment Principles event, Equality Means Business. And every time you hear me speaking everywhere, I always say it's not the right thing to do, it's a smart thing to do. And each year, this event takes place during the celebration of International Women's Day. And this Friday, you know, is the 8th of March, International Women's Day. During this time, women and men around the globe participate in events that honor women's gifts and talents, our energy, our experience, our strength, or our spirit, and our continued struggle for full and complete human rights. From Costa Rica to the Czech Republic, from Afghanistan to Australia, from Germany to Great Britain, all around the world, women are gathering. They are hosting plays and poetry reading, blog contests, dance-a-thons, concerts, and discussions. They are standing up for peace, working for equality, and running marathons for empowerment. In Johannesburg this Friday, hundreds of drummers will meet on the Rissik Street Bridge to boldly proclaim their message. The only thing you should beat is a drum. Passers-by will be invited to drum their outrage and activism against violence towards women and children. East of where we are meeting today, the United Nations, as part of the 57th Commission on the Status of Women, is conducting similar conversation about action to end violence against women. And I like to emphasize the word action. And I like to highlight the absolutely essential role of civil society organizations around the world that have taken action to drive violence against women to the very top of the agenda. We have broken the silence, and we realize at the last that a violation of one person's human rights, of women's rights, is a violation for all. So more and more we, men and women, are coming together as partners to confront such violations. We work with government, civil society, but also in the private sector, because it's also part of the web, how we address sexual harassment in the workplace. We work with the private sector to redress the underlying biases and social norms that permit women and girls to be treated less well than men and boys. The individuals, organizations, and business represented here and through the Women's Empowerment Principles globally are also our valuable partners. No longer do we have isolated parallel conversations about problems and solutions. Now we share and contribute to common platforms. One of these platforms is the Women's Empowerment Principle, as George was telling us, a partnership between UN Women and the UN Global Compact. And using these 7 principles, business, civil society, and academia can confront stubborn issues of inequality and promote creative solutions, inclusion, and systemic change. I think it is both exciting and encouraging to see that more than 500 CEOs have signed onto the Women Empowerment Principles, but we think the list has to grow. And everywhere I go, I always have a meeting with the private sector, inviting them, encouraging them, incentivizing them to be part of this platform. And it is even more gratifying to learn about the concrete actions these companies are taking to promote gender equality, health and safety, education and training for women in the workplace, in the marketplace, and in the community. So let me share with you, to spotlight some of these good practices. because they can teach, they can inspire, they can be replicated by others seeking to demonstrate their own commitment to the human rights and well-being of all. A global IT company based in India, for example, established a zero-tolerance policy against sexual harassment in the workplace. If an incident does occur, there is a whistleblower policy that protects sources and a committee that quickly reviews and acts on grievances. Another technology company offers women self-defense classes on campus and special transportation, including a security guard if necessary, to make sure women reach home safely on days where they work late. A power company in Brazil has created a shelter for women survivors of domestic violence, along with a referral and information support center. An Asian company demonstrates its commitment to the rights of girls through a Save the Girl Child initiative, which provides pregnant women with information about healthy pregnancy, safe delivery, and infant care. It also addresses the issue of female feticide by sending clear messages that girls matter. A Kenyan communication company provides free on-site daycare, private facilities for breastfeeding, and an in-house physician. Two Spanish companies offer victims of domestic violence job placement services designed to ease their transition back into the workforce. And a US-based digital media company understands the important link between women and the use of technology in promoting freedom and empowerment. And so, they provide travel and scholarship assistance for women to attend technology-focused learning events around the world. I'm pleased to say I could go on at length, citing many other examples. The sheer numbers of and range of industries show that there is a growing worldwide commitment to end violence against women and promote gender equality. Just ask your colleagues why they instituted these principles and how they are benefiting. Just as importantly, these examples demonstrate that actions and policies to foster women's inclusion and equality are also smart business decisions. That's what was Georg telling us, and that was this main idea when, at that time, UNIFEM and then UN Women started this platform with UN Global Compact, because after all, equality means business. Let's look. Probably I will repeat figures that you already know, but it's always useful to remember. A World Bank study found that managers could increase worker productivity by 25 to 40% by eliminating discrimination against female workers and managers. Harvard Business Review looked at 215 Fortune 500 companies over 28 years. It found organizations with a higher number of women executives perform better in terms of profits as a percent of revenue, assets, and stockholder equity by a range to 18 to 69%. A Goldman Sachs study reveals that reducing barriers to female labor force participation would increase America's GDP by 9%, the Eurozone GDP by 13%, and Japan's by 16%. And the World Economic Forum 2012 Global Gender Gap Report states it simple, and I will quote, "There is a strong correlation between those countries that are most successful at closing the gender gap and those that are most economically competitive." You will always listen to the ministers of the Nordic countries said that it's not because they're rich that they can advance on gender equality, that they're rich because when they had to make the right decisions at last century, they decided that the only way for their economy and their society to develop is to include from the beginning women and men in the similar possibility. And now then, we can all see not only that probably they are the countries with the biggest, I would say, rate or rank of gender equality, but also economies that go well and very sustainable. As a mother, as a grandmother of two boys, as a pediatrician, former president, but now executive director of UN Women, the fate of the next generation, both girls and boys, occupies much of my thinking. An event such as this also reminds me that there is a broad pipeline in place to continue and further this work so that in the years to come, our children, our grandchildren will be part of societies that are different, that are better, because they will be more equitable, more inclusive than today's. So let me close this way. Like many of you, I was fascinated to hear that an asteroid that recently lit up the Siberian sky, and by the power it contained, the equivalent of many thousands of tons of TNT. But I was also struck, not quite the same way as Siberia, by the comments of a NASA scientist and astronaut who saw this happen and who believes we need a warning system to track these space rocks and metals that enter the Earth's atmosphere. He characterized it as a wake-up call from space, a reminder that we've got to pay attention to what's out there. He asked, wouldn't it be silly if we get wiped out because we weren't looking? So you would say, why is she mentioning this? But there is a reason, believe me. Morning, that gender equality and inclusion are also powers out there. Powers which can be harnessed to foster economic and social growth and inclusion. Wouldn't be silly, wouldn't be tragic if the world failed to rise out of poverty and violence because we choose simply not to see and use those forces and open space for women. The world must continue to wake up and pay attention to the right means, girls and boys, men and women, to reach for the stars and live up to their potential. Because it is time for equal rights, equal opportunities, equal participation. It is time to open public spaces, decision-making spaces for women. So the actions that you take are helping the world to do so.